Everybody. I'm Chloe and I'm going to be leading the session this afternoon. I can see people are just making their way in, and we are a couple of minutes early, so we're not going to start right away. I'll make sure I start at 4 o'clock, so you've got a few minutes to go and get a cup of tea or go to the loo, whatever you need to do. We will be using the chat window a little bit throughout the session. So if you'd like to let me know what school you're from, whereabouts you're joining us from, what your role is in school, that would be really interesting for me. And as much as I have a lot to share over the next 45 minutes to an hour, equally, I'm hoping to hear about some of your experiences or your ideas. And if you share those in the chat window, that chat's accessible to everybody, and that'll be really useful. So thank you so much, and we will be starting in a couple of minutes' time. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I know you've probably all got loads to be getting on with, so I will try and be really succinct in what I have to talk to you about. I'm Chloe, and I am one of the education consultants here at Picture News, and I write a lot of our secondary content. So today we're going to have a look at what comes in one of our Picture News packs. So you might be a subscribed school already, in which case you'll know some of these resources that I'm running through. If you're not, hopefully a lot of what I've got to say also applies to, to wherever you get your news from, but it'll also give you a bit of a taster of some of our resources. I want to talk about how news learning can really support children's understanding of things like the British values, the protected characteristics, and the UN rights. We'll look at some cross-curricular links and how news can really be integrated into lots of different subject areas. And finally, just want to consider the different ways that you can really get the most out of learning about and from current affairs. It's a really sort of rich context to be supporting students to access throughout their time at secondary school. Lots of these issues and stories are completely unavoidable in this digital age. So if we as practitioners can be one step ahead of that, and be really helpful for our students in terms of giving them the tools to have really productive, meaningful, respectful conversations about a lot of these issues, then I think that's a real win. So the session is being recorded, so if anyone from your school was not able to make it, feel free to share the recording. I'll send that out after the session. I'll also send the slides out, so if you do see anything that you want to go back to, I'll send those over as well. And if you are not currently subscribed, you can expect some free samples. They'll be on their way to you shortly. So thanks for introducing yourselves. We've got Nikki from Alchemy, in Tainham. Louise from Delta Independent School, Lauren also from the Alchemy, you're a pastoral support lead and a tutor, and Beth from Oakwood in Rotherham, who's running the tutor programme. So hopefully lots of what I have to say this evening will be really useful for you. Equally, if you think of anything that I've missed, or you want to add anything or share any of your own thoughts or ideas, please do. It's useful for me in terms of writing these resources, but I'm sure the other teachers and school leaders that are on the call are, it's always great to share practice and hear other ideas from people in the same field. And thanks, we've also got Vicky from Hopedale SEMH Provision. So hi to everyone, and thanks again for joining me. So I'd quite like you to think to yourselves for a minute. Just want to gauge some starting points really of how you're accessing news and what role that currently plays in the classroom. So do you currently discuss news stories with students, and what does that look like? Do they come to you with the stories and you address them, or are you using any resources? It might be picture news, or it might be something else. And I'm also wondering whether students are interested in discussing current affairs, or are there any particular stories that seem to grip them, or get them talking and get them asking questions. So have a think to yourselves, and please do pop any of your responses or ideas in the chat window. It would be really interesting to hear about those. I'll keep dipping in and out of the chat, but I will go on, but do feel free to pop things in there, and I'll keep an eye on it. So we are Picture News. We really believe in teaching the news to children and young people through a central image and a big question. You can see some of our past posters here. The beauty of this way is that the pictures are so accessible and interesting and engaging for our students. And also the news, just being what it is, it covers such a broad range of topics. So that could be things that students are already kind of interested and engaged with, like maybe sports news, or thinking about the environment, or certain kind of popular culture stories that are going on. But it can also really kind of teach and help them to talk about more mature themes. So maybe some political issues that might be going on, or if there's any social trouble or unrest, such as some of the riots over the summer holidays back in August. These stories can be difficult to talk about and a little bit sensitive. But they're no less worthy of being talked about. And I often find it's actually those tricky stories that the children seem to hone in on. They want to know more. They want to understand why these topics are contentious. And so resources like Picture News can be really helpful, because they are pitched and written carefully, so as to keep things respectful, keep everyone open-minded, but to encourage asking those questions and learning about real issues that are happening in the world. Okay, super. Nikki says, our students have a breakfast club from 8:30 till 9. We generally chat with them and talk about what's in the news. Students are only interested in big news stories such as celebrities and the American election. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess that breakfast club is quite kind of intimate time where potentially you've got that space for children to be open and honest about the things that they're thinking about, and it can be a good time to talk about all news, sensitive or otherwise. Oh yeah, the American election. I was chatting to someone at a secondary school the other day, and they said, "Oh, it's just not relevant to me." So that's interesting that your students were interested and engaged in that. That's exciting. Siobhan says we have a news quiz each Friday, which covers lots of news stories. We've dipped in with picture news over the past year and found it useful for some topics. That's great. And I really love the idea of a quiz. It adds a bit of sort of like a fun element. I think sometimes the news has the stigma of being boring or complicated or just not easily accessible. So that's great. Thank you for sharing those. So some of our reasons for teaching the news are on the screen now. So first of all, it's stuff that's happening in the real world and it's happening right now. So if students are feeling really engaged or kind of outraged by something that's going on and they're feeling passionate about it, they can take action. And, you know, by action, it doesn't have to be anything massive. It can be something small within school or within the local community, but that makes them feel like they are standing up for something that they believe in, or you know, acting to make a difference. Secondly, and we touched a little bit on this earlier, news stories can link to so many different subject areas. So again, there's always new topics in the news, and they can be kind of unpicked in lots of different ways, and in different lessons. And the news stories are, you know, they're just that, they are new, and they're exciting, and hopefully it helps students to feel engaged with what they're learning about. And again, this idea that it's something that is real life, it isn't a fictional story or kind of a hypothetical situation that they're learning from. These are issues that people are actually facing. And lastly, and probably my favourite, is this idea that the news can really teach children about the world around them, and kind of really equip them with a solid understanding of the state of things, of what issues people are facing in different parts of the world. My teaching background initially was around London and Dagenham area, but most recently I taught in North Yorkshire. And our cohorts were not incredibly diverse. And so for our students, it was really important to be looking out into the world, exposing our students to lots of different kinds of people, different ways of living, and really opening their minds and giving them vocabulary and the confidence to ask questions about those people, you know, in a really kind of curious and thoughtful way. So here is one of our weekly packs, or the first few slides anyway. So if you do use Picture News, you probably know that the packs are emailed every Friday morning, early on, probably about 6 or 7 in the morning. The idea is that it just gives you chance on a Friday to have a look at what the story might be. I know some schools introduce the story on a Friday and let that sit over the weekend, ahead of, you know, starting to really get into that story the following week. And in your pack, there is the big poster. This is really good quality, so it can be printed out nice and big and displayed somewhere, if that's one way that you like to kind of display and showcase news stories. It has the big question on there. There's also a map which explains whereabouts in the world this story is happening. We do lots of UK-based stories, as lots of our schools are in the UK, but equally we look at stories happening abroad as well. And then there's a kind of a brief explanation of what it is that's happening that week. So these slides are all within your PowerPoint, and they can be shuffled around or deleted as you see fit. So as I said, we generally start off with unpicking a picture, and we try and choose pictures that are really thought-provoking and engaging. So like this story, I'll remember this one forever, even though it was a few months ago that we wrote it, because this image really stuck in my mind, and we find that with the children, it kind of hooks them in and they get lost in these pictures, looking around to find what they can see, thinking about what they like or what they don't like. Can they predict what's happening? Do they have any questions about that picture? And again, whether you're using picture news resources or not, I really believe in this approach of getting a photo that's linked to that story, and starting your discussions from there, especially for younger students, or especially if it's a story that's kind of a little bit complicated. You can access so much prior knowledge and prior experiences that the children have linked to that picture, which can then form the foundation for going on to deeper understanding of the story for that week. So here are a few sort of question prompts, and in particular, we're going to talk a little bit more about getting emotional responses from the children, and beginning to develop empathy and emotional literacy, which is really, really important, and isn't necessarily always happening at home. So here's the story linked to this picture. This lady, she is called Jasmine Paris, and she completed the Barkley Marathons, which was an ultra marathon which took place in Tennessee, or it does every year. It's 100 miles, and you have to complete it within 60 hours, which initially I thought that was quite a long time, but then I realised she didn't have any technology, and all of the runners just have to navigate their way around, and it's pretty rough going, tricky terrain, lots of hills. So yeah, it was quite amazing, really, and she was the first woman to complete that race. So we thought that was quite an exciting news story, and again, it just really sort of captured the children's interests. And it was an inspiring story about persevering and keeping on going and not being put off because no one's ever done it before. I find with lots of the news stories, and especially the ones that we choose for the resources, it's not necessarily just about learning the facts from that news story. It's about taking a step back and thinking about what bigger lessons we can take, and reflecting on our own opinions and kind of developing those and thinking about what would we do in that situation, or what can we learn from this woman or from this story. So within the story, there's also a link to an article, which should be pretty accessible for secondary students, and there's also a useful video link. So if you feel like the video can explain that story, or you just want a bit of a break and let someone else explain that story, then that's there for you. There's also lots and lots of questioning then, once the students have looked at the picture, had discussions about that, learned a little bit about the story, maybe they've watched that video, then they can really start to think about these questions. And they are written and designed really to really deepen the students' engagement with the story, and get them to think really critically about that story, and to reflect on how that's made them feel, or how they can relate to that, and to begin asking questions like, where do I stand on this issue, and how is that, what I'm responding, and what values of mine is that really playing into. So this idea, I guess, that not only are they learning about something that's happening in the world, but I think it's also helping them to learn about themselves, and to understand, that they do have these intrinsic personal values, maybe, and where have they come from, and how are they responding to the news story compared to a friend, because we do all respond differently, and this can be a really great learning curve for students to really open their minds and be understanding that people are going to come at this from all different angles, and it's important that we understand and respect that other people might think or feel differently than we do, and that it's okay to question about that, as long as we are kind and respectful. So we'll also link in vital statistics each week. Again, they're just another way of looking at the story. Often they're or I find the statistics quite surprising. It's really great information outside of the main story. So again, it's just another way of engaging students with the material for that week. And once they've kind of heard the statistic and they've been helped to understand it, again, it just links back to them, and they can give their opinion on are they surprised about that statistic? Have they heard that before? Can it be applied to any other areas? So as I've mentioned before, we really urge people to, or teachers to, get emotional engagement from the students, for a few reasons, really. Understanding how they feel, and starting to use that vocabulary to really describe their feelings and to convey that to other people is great, for building future relationships, for kind of getting on and having a social life. Being able to explain feelings, it is really, really important for that. It helps them build, meaningful connections and relationships with other people. They can also listen to their friends or peers or classmates, and listen to their feelings. And that can make others feel really valued, and heard. And again, that's really, really good for relationship building. And it develops that empathy, and really encourages students to make the space for everyone to feel however they do about certain topics. And in a world where there are lots of contentious things happening at the moment, and it can cause conflict, if we can be teaching our students that it's okay to disagree, it's okay to feel differently, but to remain calm, and to have conversations about that, then I think they will be the better for it. And so thinking about empathy and feelings, this can really be the first step towards talking about and understanding and standing up against discrimination. So within the United Convention on the Rights of the Child, the second article within that convention is the non-discrimination article. So this idea that it is unacceptable to treat people differently because of things like race or sex, or disability, or whatever it might be. And I think as younger children, they learn to get along with friends and to be kind to everybody. Well, now it's time for children and students to begin to understand that these kind of rules don't only apply at school, but they are part of society at large. So on the right hand side, you might recognize these 9 characteristics. They are the protected characteristics, which are protected within the Equality Act. So that is UK law, that it is illegal to discriminate against people based on any of those characteristics. And I think that can be really poignant for students, because it's kind of painting this picture that everything that they've been learning at school up until now has a role to play in life beyond school and life as an adult. In modern Britain, discrimination legally is not tolerated. And if students have been learning how to put themselves into other shoes, and to try and be understanding of other people, that will help them to see when discrimination is taking place, whether that's discrimination against them or discrimination against somebody else. But definitely having these conversations about feelings and empathy and self-reflection is really, really important when we're considering things like discrimination and difference, and tolerating others, and actually standing up for other people if they need that. Another great byproduct of really getting the children kind of emotionally engaged with stories, especially those stories that seem to stick out to them. I know someone was mentioning earlier that they have used Picture News kind of here and there for certain topics. I wonder if those topics were just on your syllabus, or whether students had come into you with a certain news story. But anyway, getting emotional and getting an emotional response from the children can then lead to them feeling like they want to take action on something. And that can be really powerful. And as we said before, it doesn't need to be really big action on a big scale. It can be small things. So we had one school learning about elderly people possibly feeling lonely, and now they visit the care home that's in their village, and they go and talk to the residents there. And those children now feel like, and they are making a very real difference within their community. Another school said they were learning about the huge amount of clothing waste that's happening in the UK at the moment, and is going to landfill. And so students brought in any clothes that they had from home, uniform, and they sold them on stalls at school as second-hand clothes. So again, kind of great for students to kind of be learning about something and make a connection to action that they can take that can make a very real difference. So within your pack, here is the poster that we were just talking about before. After you've gone through your the questions and learning about the various statistics, we then also make links to a British value, a protected characteristic, and a UN right. These can be sort of quite abstract concepts. So I always find having a news story just gives them a bit of context and can really help children to see these values or these characteristics in action. And it can really help them to understand what they really look like, and why those rights are there, or why those protected characteristics are in fact protected. In terms of British values, equally, that real life scenario can really illustrate to students what values are being adhered to, or perhaps are being ignored, and therefore why these values are really important. So a little bit about the British values. They originally came as part of the Prevent strategy back in 2011. And then as Prevent has sort of quietened down a little bit, actually the British values have remained kind of front and centre and really important in all schools. The idea behind them is that they allow for freedom of expression and freedom of choice, freedom of speech, while also bearing in mind we have to live alongside other people, and we need to be considerate of their feelings and their thoughts as well. So you may know these already, but I'll just quickly run through them. So the first is individual liberty, and this is just all about students making choices for themselves, having their own wants and preferences, and exercising those in their choices. The interesting thing, I guess, about individual liberty is they're also free to kind of make the right choice or choose the right thing to do. So like I mentioned just before, when we're thinking about the values overall, yes, individual liberty means that you can make choices for yourself, but we need to be considerate of how those choices might impact other people, and in which case would that change your choice. And a good time potentially to talk about this at school can be if there's been a disagreement or a bit of conflict. Once things have calmed down, looking back on that situation and thinking about the choices that were made, and what led to a less than desirable outcome. It can really encourage students to, in those moments, try and, walk away and take a step back, because you can avoid making a choice that you wouldn't normally have made if you weren't, angry and upset. So yeah, that can be a really interesting one to talk about at school. Next is rule of law, which I always find is probably one of the ones that stick in students' minds the most. this idea that laws exist and generally they are there to keep us safe and happy and healthy. So this can again really easily be explored at school with school rules and classroom rules, and discussing those and thinking about why those are there, even questioning them if if they are maybe outdated or they're not fit for purpose. Students can potentially be involved in those conversations to make changes, if you think that's necessary. It can be great to get visitors in. So I know whenever I talk to students about how they are learning about British values at school, the one really common theme that I always get is we had a PC sergeant in, or we had a judge come in, and again it just really brings those values to life. Another great element of the rule of law is the fact that we're all responsible for upholding those. So I think getting the students involved with writing them in the first place can give them that sense of ownership and that sense of, right, this is my responsibility to make sure that these rules or whatever are being upheld. Democracy, so this is another really kind of popular one and a really great one for practicing at school. So this idea that all the children have a voice and they deserve to be heard, and equally they also then need to listen to the voices of others. So again, kind of making that space for everybody to have their say. And really interestingly, you can talk about voting. I'm sure there are times at school where you vote for lots and lots of different things. And what happens when you're not in the majority and something is chosen, and yeah, maybe half or a bit more than half of the people are happy. What about those other people? That can be a really interesting conversation to have around democracy. It's the best system that we've come up with so far, but can the students think of a better way for everybody to feel like their voices are heard? If you have student council and voting for things like that, that's all part of this democratic process. And again, really great links for students to see that what they are part of at school will continue throughout their adult life. We live in a democracy. They will have the chance to vote for the country's leaders, local leaders. So it's important that they take that right seriously, and school can be a really great time to practice that. And lastly, we've got mutual respect and tolerance. So sometimes people talk about there being 5 British values. We've just condensed mutual respect and tolerance into one. We just feel like they really complement each other, and there are lots of crossovers between them. So just the idea that everybody is different, we embrace and we learn about differences, and we are kind to everyone. The traditional treating others as we would want to be treated. And this is a really key part of ensuring a cohesive society. Equally within school, you want to have harmony, because that's the best way to make everybody happy. And ultimately, the students are at school to learn, and how can they learn if people are being left out or isolated? So again, talking about emotions and empathy in relation to this value is really important, because it helps to put students in the position of being ostracized or being left out, and how would that make you feel, and therefore when you use these words or when you do this, how is that making that person feel? And are you okay with that for you as a person, and with your values even, are you okay with making somebody feel like that? Again, really good conversations to be having. And the values as a whole are really a set of guidelines for how to behave and how to be a really positive contributor to not just your school environment, but to the larger society, especially once students have left school. So I really love that kind of real world element of the British values. I realise I'm talking quite a lot, so again, please interrupt me at any time if you feel like there is anything I've missed. I think I've got some comments in the chat. These were talking about what do you use or how are you learning about the news. Bethan says, we don't do anything regularly, but we try to drop things into tutor time as things crop up. I only found out that we have the subscription to Picture News. Do I need a login? Yes, you do. I think generally these go to your finance kind of director, but I can also send that over to you. That's no problem. And T Cape says, we use Picture News for assemblies. It's a great way to get discussions from our small classes. Send school, classes of up to 8, and you find it really engaging. Oh, that's super. Yeah, it's great for assemblies, isn't it? Especially with that big picture for everyone to look at. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. Oh, it's nice that I'm not just on my own. So we talked a little bit about the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So this is just, again, sort of similarly to or in the same vein as the British values and the protected characteristics, but these are all about children's individual rights, and specifically as minors under the age of 18, all children are protected by these rights within ratified countries, which the UK is. And the news, again, is a really great place to see these rights in action, and to help students understand their own rights, and again, the rights of others, and standing up for other people, and embracing this idea that everybody is different. There are 54 articles altogether within the UN CRC, which is quite a lot. And so if you are having conversations around the news, I'd really recommend just trying to link this in, once a week or whenever it might be, just to get students kind of more aware of all of these different rights. Students really seem to like these because they are specific for under 18s. You can get this printout online, actually. It's just like a free PDF from the website. I'll pop the link into my email later. But that can be really useful to have up just as a visual cue. Even I still need it when I'm writing the resources to make sure I know which ones link the best. But equally, that can make for really interesting discussion. So again, if you are using the Picture News resources, look at the story, read all about it, get the children excited about it, and then can they make the link, whether that's to one of these rights, or can they make a link to a protected characteristic or a British value, and then reveal which one we've linked it to. And I'm by no means saying that we're right week on week. I think often there's lots of different ways that you could look at a story, and that you could link it to loads of these values or rights. So one of my favourite parts of the secondary resource is we try and include 2 other perspectives, and we try and make these sort of slightly different, not always opposing, but just coming at the story from different angles. Again, it just gives students the chance to hear somebody else's opinion. It can spark discussion or debate. It kind of expands their thinking. So it's so easy to go into a story and be confident that, well, this is right or this is wrong, and it's black and white, and it's easy to know what's going on. But I don't think the news is always like that. I don't think there is always a right and wrong answer. Often there's lots of nuance and levels of things that are going on, and I really hope that these alternative perspectives can highlight those and get students questioning what they originally thought. And I think another really interesting kind of activity or way of approaching the news is get students' responses initially. What do they initially think of that story, and what would they do differently? And then at the end, after all of the discussion, you know, at the end of the week, how has their opinion changed, or you know, how have their thoughts changed? Maybe they haven't changed at all, but it's definitely interesting to, you know, after the discussion, after other ideas and opinions have been considered, has that changed things for the students? And then we do, so on the right hand side, there are just a few more questions. They're different to the questions in the main resource, so they just try and take discussion off in different ways, and kind of move on a little bit from the story, you know, if you have time, or if it's a story that the students have particularly enjoyed. And there's also a really nice reflection, so it kind of ties up, or sums up, if you like, everything that's been discussed. Some schools, or a school said to me that once they've done all of their learning about the story, they then have the students write their own reflections with what they've taken from that week's news, which I thought was a really nice idea. So obviously, as we create news resources, and so we try and just follow the news and then pick up the most current stories that we can. Sometimes we're able to link these with an awareness day or a month. And so obviously last month was Black History Month. And we came across this story. So this was our poster a couple of weeks ago. This is at a college near Edinburgh, and they had this vending machine installed, and it was in collaboration with Penguin Random House, the publishers. And the vending machine was filled with books written by authors of colour. So these were books that maybe weren't traditionally on the library shelves, or they might not even have been in the school library at all. And the idea was children or students could go to the vending machine, borrow a book, and, you know, get exposed to literature that they maybe hadn't been exposed to before. And we linked that to this value of mutual respect and tolerance. So obviously the idea of Black History Month is that potentially in the past, the stories of Black people have been mistold or oversimplified. And so kind of this idea that everybody deserves the right to share their own story, and tell that truly, how it happened and how they experienced it. And it's really important that we listen to all people's stories, no matter you know, their race, their age, their gender, or anything like that. So that was a really great story, and a nice way for talking about Black History Month as well. That was a really great one. So there's a few sort of comments from people who've been using the resources. I really like this one from this Year 9 student. It's got my class closer as we actually listen to each other now. I think that can be a really great product of, you know, exploring news and having these discussions and highlighting those values of listening, and making the space for other people, and being respectful and tolerant. Hopefully the resources encourage really meaningful dialogue. And like this Year 10 student has said, they get to discuss it with friends, with, you know, as a class, with students, year groups, with family members. Often teachers say to me that the news learning doesn't generally stop at the end of the session. It kind of seems to sit with students for a bit, and then they'll come back later with questions, or kind of with an opinion that they're feeling out or they're not sure of. So it's really, really valuable for discussion. And then this pupil who just says, I love it because it's just 20 minutes where we can forget about A levels, and think about something else. And that actually that something else is really important. And they say it themselves, you know, social skills, debating skills, having conversations around important issues, some of which I knew nothing about. So yeah, it's really, you know, informing students, and that's what we want for our young people. We want young people to be socially apt and confident and informed. I think that can be, that's great if they leave school with all of those skills. So how can you use news resources then? Definitely classroom discussions. So holding discussions, not just that link to the rights, but to stories or to things that have really jumped out at them for certain packs or certain weeks, or certain things that are going on. And you can think about different types of stories as well, and we try to do this with the resources. Yes, nationally or more localized news, but equally, embracing global news and helping students to see their part in this, global place that we live. Discussion and debate. So stories, news stories lend themselves so well to having debates. And here's just a few kind of sentence starters. Because when we say debate, we don't mean, argue and fall out. We mean listen and listen, not just to respond, but, listening to understand, that really active listening, as if, I want to learn more about what you think. And that doesn't mean, and it doesn't have to mean that the children have to agree with each other all the time. But it does mean that, they're showing respect, and sometimes you've got to be really brave to share your opinions on certain stories, especially if they are sensitive. And listening is such a key way of making people feel safe, and that they can share that honestly what they think and what they feel. In terms of Ofsted inspections, the British values are in there by name. Inspectors are looking for students who have, at the very least, a developing understanding of the British values, an appreciation of diversity, and an understanding that diversity is a good thing. It's something to be celebrated. It can help students to discover interests they didn't know they had. The comment on the previous slide, where they're now talking about issues that they never even knew existed, can help students to really build resilience. A lot of what's going on in the world is not always that pleasant. But if students can be supported to learn about and to cope with that, and to talk openly and to share when something's worried or upset them, that's really great resilience kind of building for the future. It can help them to understand and really value mental health, developing that empathy and understanding and being there for friends if something has worried or concerned them. And ultimately, it's really helping them to become responsible, respectful, and active citizens who can have a really positive contribution to our society. And I think, it sounds like a big goal, but hopefully by having these conversations and introducing students to this huge range of issues and stories, can be a really sort of contributing factor to producing students and young people who are engaged and who are informed and who are really valuable. It's also, lots of these news discussions are great for thinking about spiritual, moral, and social and cultural development. So they're reflecting on different values and different beliefs, especially when we're linking it back to those British values and protected characteristics. It helps children or students to start kind of seeing the difference between right and wrong, and that exploring that grey area and what that means. It can engage them with British law, in terms of rule of law, and seeing how that plays out in real life contexts. They can have moral and ethical debates about issues that come up in the news. And it can really help them to understand you know, who they are at their core and what it is that they stand for. And if they can talk about this and understand where they are now, it's going to help them to develop their opinions, and to develop their own morals and values moving forwards. You know, as well as discussion and writing, and you know, some great writing opportunities can come from everything we've talked about, whether that's writing to people in power, or you know, writing out new rules, or loads and loads of different things. There's also loads of creative ways to respond to the news. So whether that's just simple drawing, especially you know, representing emotions through using colours and lines and textures. We had a school send us this picture. So they had they were learning about this news story, how have poppies changed over time, and the students had each made a poppy, and I think one of the kids had said, oh, can we make them into something? And so they made them into this amazing dress, which I thought was really cool. I feel like the kids are so much more creative than I ever was, so they never cease to amaze me with their ideas. Another school, simply the students made poppies and then they put them all up, and it was kind of a display of not only thinking about remembrance and talking about the significance of the poppy, but also celebrating how unique each and every one of those poppies is. And that was kind of a representation of this class and their work, and they were really proud of that. So I love to include that one. News mapping, so where, you know, when you're thinking about the news story for that week, find out where it's from. World maps are, you know, easily accessible, and this can become kind of a working news display, of kind of putting little brief explanations of what that story was, or you could include the value or whatever your focus is for that time, and have that up for display for kids to, you know, to continue thinking about or to revisit certain stories. Like, you know, oh, do you remember we learned about that thing that happened in Italy or Iran or wherever it might be. Getting students to lead assemblies, again, is a really super way of spreading news and really inspiring other students to want to talk about it too. It gives students the chance to step into that leadership role and share what they know, and you know, share their knowledge and expertise on this subject. Again, it's really engaging for other students to listen to peers and, you know, look up to them and think, gosh, that's, you know, amazing that they're standing up there and leading this thing, and you know, it might inspire them to want to do the same. Using social media, so you know, so many schools are using social media more and more, and it's just a really great way of showing students that their voices are really important, and that they matter. Because on social media, you know, it's not just sharing in an assembly, or it's not just in a display around school, or with parents. You know, it goes so far beyond that. And I think a lot of what students have to say about the news deserves that visibility. And so much work is going on in schools, I think, that just doesn't get seen. So if you do have a social media account and you can get a post up there, I think it's a real kind of win-win-win situation. I won't talk through all of those because we've mentioned a few of them already, but there's just some other ideas of ways that you can use news, even if you print an article yourself, or you know, the students are interested in. These cards can be kind of snipped up, and the students can apply those to loads and loads of different news stories. And so I guess I won't read through all of this either, but the real hope behind the resources is just that they really equip students to be informed and engaged citizens, who are respectful of others, and who are confident to talk about issues that really matter to them. So before I let you go, I'll just show you, oh, and was it Bethan asking about the online area before? There is an online area with your subscription and you need a login and a password for this. But all of the past packs are on there. So if ever one jumps to mind or you're doing something, there's a search function and you can find loads and loads of packs that will be linked to that subject or that topic. And we also have a discussion board. So if students are using laptops, they can go onto the website. If it's a story that they've particularly enjoyed or has resonated with them, I can't scroll down because it's just a screenshot, but just below here, there's just a few fields. They just fill in their name and then they can write their comment, and then we pick. I think 8 can fit onto the website at a time, so we just pick some of those comments to be showcased on the discussion board, which can be really exciting. That is it from me. I'm very happy to stick around in case you have any questions. I know there is somebody I need to get a login for, so I will do that, Bethan. That's no problem. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully you've got some time now to go and do all of your many busy jobs. Thanks. Oh no, you're very welcome. It's no problem. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, Louise, as soon as the recording is ready, I'm going to send that out to you with a copy of the slides as well. Yeah. No problem. Okay, thanks everybody. And I'll stop the session here.